So here we go again with another product install, something new for the bike. It's a cartridge elimination kit from TrackerDie. I also upgraded the suspension on this with some progressive suspension, and so I'll be replacing that as well. Forecast shows rain for the next 7 to 10 days, so taking the time to just kind of do a little project. Yeah, it should be fun. I've never done anything like this, but you know, I'm excited. I've watched a couple of videos on YouTube from the TrackerDie guys, as well as some of the other videos for the suspension install and rebuilding forks. So I feel pretty confident in moving forward. I got the shop manual too. Here is an update where I've gotten so far. I took the fender off, which was pretty simple. It's just the 2 bolts on each side. It comes right off. Then I got to the brakes here, and I'm having them hung up by this bungee cord. I put an engine lift plate between the 2 brake pads just so that they don't close up, or it just, you know, avoids having any issues when I put it back on. Again, just kind of putting a little bit of a rag there so that it doesn't scratch anything up, and just being mindful of not having any pressure on the lines. So it's all held up here, supported by the bike. And now I've moved on to the wheel here, where I took off this front nut here. Next step would then be to then loosen up the pinch bolt over here. That's where I'm at. I'll probably take the wheel off here in just a few seconds, but things are pretty smooth. It's not that difficult as far as having all of the tools at hand. So far, everything has just been hand tools. All right, it's getting real. I did not anticipate getting this far today, but it really has been pretty simple just to take the front wheel off. I strapped down my bike onto the lift, so it might be janky looking, but for me, that was enough to provide a little bit of security in this process. I did notice that as soon as I took the wheel off, some of that weight shifted back, and had I not had these straps on the front end, I don't know what would have happened, but that's providing enough security for me. So far, the next thing will likely be taking off those 2 front forks. But so far, it's been pretty simple. I put everything back together on the wheel just so that I don't lose the placement and I know where things go. So again, the pinch bolt, the spacer on this. On the other side, again, I have the spacer on the right-hand side, the washer and the nut. Again, just so that I don't lose it and it's in place. Everything so far has its location, and I'm able to just ensure that I don't lose anything in the process. I have it all ready to go, set up for the next steps, which should be undoing these 2 pinch bolts here. And so what I wanted to do is get something that will allow me to drop this enough to then be able to unscrew the fork tube cap screw. Okay, so that was pretty straightforward. It really only required a T45, so I was able to unbolt those, and then they just slide right off, being careful not to let them drop onto the ground. So as you can see, I put them back on the fork trees there to snug them up and then crack the bottom drain bolt, and now I'm letting it all drain out with fluid. All right, so here I'm at the next point here, which is essentially disassembling this top end. I wasn't able to find a socket wrench for this, so I got this big ass crescent wrench that should be enough. I was able to break it up a little bit. That being said, I kind of wrapped it up with some electrical tape just to avoid scratching it up with this. All right, so as you can tell, this is all one piece. Obviously, this is being held together by the lower cartridge components, so there's no spring pressure that completely came up on this, and so the next step here will be to hold on to this and undo this from this top, and that'll break the assembly up. Unfortunately, I lost footage of the right side fork, and that's the one with a lot of spring pressure, so be careful. Here's a diagram of the Sportster's Type 1 fork, which is pretty common on models in the mid to early 2000s. And on my bike, the right side fork, this side has the compressed springs that will shoot out if you don't hold it down when removing the fork cap. The asymmetrical setup for the 2017 Iron 883 model has a cartridge on the left side fork, which is the brake side. That's what I'm replacing. This diagram shows how it's all put together. Alright, so I want to show a little bit of a difference in why you might want to get the extended dampening rods from TrackerDie. This is the original one that comes off on the asymmetrical forks. On the 2017 Sportster that I have here, this was all on the left hand side fork, and then instead of having a cartridge side, you would have it so that it matches both. Alright, so here is a comparison of what you get from the TrackerDie extended damper kit. So what you see here is the taller version and then the stock size one, significantly different in size, and you'll want to keep this and then replace it onto the new one. They send you the bottom end here that goes on the damper, and then here is a view of the two springs. So the progressive spring on the top here, as you can see, its coils are tighter on the bottom versus the top, and then on the stock one, it's kind of evenly spaced across most of the spring, and then as you get to the top it expands just slightly. So there is a difference in size as well. Again, I imagine that's based off it being compressed on the bottom and having a little bit of a tighter winding coil down below. So I'll replace it with this one as the new one. As far as the spacers, the stock fork components include this metal spacer on the right hand side. Since I'll be eliminating the cartridge side, I had to cut the provided PVC spacer from the Progressive suspension kit to match. I went onto their website to double check the cut size. So now both forks will have the matching extended dampers, progressive springs, PVC spacers, washers, and amount of fork oil. I've also come to the conclusion that I won't need to separate the bottom sliders from the fork tubes, although the TrackerDie kit does come with the new fork seals, but I'm going to avoid it for now. If they leak or there's an issue, I'll tear them down and do it all over, but for now I'm going to avoid it if I can and see how it goes. So now that I have the lower sliders connected to the new damper rods and the fork tubes don't appear to have separated, I'm getting ready to fill them up with new fork oil. I just bought two 16-ounce jugs of the Type E fork oil from the Harley dealership. The Progressive suspension instructions have one set of recommendations related to the fork tubes and the distance to fill them from the top of the fork tube, and then the TrackerDie instructions said add 12 ounces. So I went with 12 ounces. The tricky part was getting it all set up and ready to go so that I could hold on to the filled tubes, grab the PVC spacers and the washer, and put it all together and lug it down with the fork caps, which will be under pressure needed to collapse the springs in place. I'm getting everything ready to put the front end back together and start torquing things down. I have it all pretty much on a time lapse from here on out. I went in the reverse order of the way I took things off the bike to put them back on. I was referring to the shop manual for the torque specs, and then also checking all of my clearances before committing to the final placement of the parts, which helped. To get that wheel back on, you definitely want to get an extra pair of hands if you can. All right, so here it sits. As you can tell, it's got no dust boot covers on. I'm gonna run it without them for a bit. I'm gonna try to find covers that go over that are the metal version. But my issue here, my stopping point, is my brake line. So I realized that on this stock setup, when you have the fork boots, they go all the way to this stem here, this clamp. And so generally what that looks like is the boot will meet and mate up with this top part here. And so obviously these are much shorter, and with the damper extensions, I have an extra like 4 inches there. So that's great. But my brake line for the front caliper is too short. I feel like I'm right on the edge, like I could probably put this down onto the ground and have plenty of slack to tighten it all up. But as I get into some of these deeper turns, you know, locking the wheel all the way the opposite direction, I won't have enough slack if there's a major bump or something that makes my front suspension really pull all the way out. Because again, this is just hanging here, so obviously it's drooped all the way down, but if I was to lower it, I might get away with putting that back on there, getting on the road, and having enough give to allow the brake line to work. And I don't know if I'm 100% confident in that setup as it sits, so I might have to order a brake line. Yeah, happy how it turned out, but now I'm shit out of luck without a front brake, so that sucks. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, more to come in a bit. Shit. Holy fuck. Well, there she lays. Oh my god, that is wild. So you might not be able to tell here, but the way this thing is leaning, it's got me a little bit concerned. I was not expecting that much. That is pretty aggressive. I mean, it looks dope. It looks really cool, but that was scary to not only get on and off the jack, but to then pull it off the jack and have it just continue to tip until it rested on that kickstand. It's really stressing. So as I mentioned, there's my brake. I'm gonna see if it makes any sense of trying to line it up and bolt it on, and if not, gonna have to order that up and do a whole nother video on removing that brake line and putting a new brake line on. I'm so excited. That looks so good. That's sick. Man, TrackerDie killed it. All right, they're on. So I just couldn't wait. I wanted to see how far I could get it, and I was able to buckle this all back up and then get them on. And there's a little bit of slack there. I had to undo this bottom bolt here that held this on. Obviously not the most confidence inspiring thing to do, but on the top even more so. There was another one right up here, and I undid that from this top stem part. So it's got some slack, it's got some give both ways as I turn and as I sit on the bike. I definitely thinking about ordering up a longer cable just so that I don't have any issues, but I mean right now definitely will be operational, and it will sit like this for a while until I get a different kickstand. All right, so there it is for now. How hard was this install? I would say not too bad, but you definitely need to commit. There's really no going back once you pop those fork caps off. You don't need to separate the fork tubes from the sliders just because other YouTube videos show it. And you definitely should just get new fork oil. If you're ordering the damper kit from TrackerDie, consider throwing in a new kickstand as well, along with a new brake line, so measure that out and prepare to bleed some brakes. I'm placing an order for a new line that will clear the damper distance and a new bar setup. Lastly, most of the tools needed for this were hand tools, but if you could get your hands on an impact wrench, do it. That'll cut down some time and it'll make it that much easier. Let me know what you think of this new look. Thanks for watching.